All right, so we're back, and now we'll look at the result. So, well, not the result, the process, I mean the service that was published. So we should be able to see that. Might as well, eventually when we do this next week, we're going to have to do this on HTTPS anyway, in order to get to work in CodePen. That's actually not a requirement. Like if you wanted to get this to work on a web page that wasn't serving up HTTPS data, you could use HTTP just fine. It's not a requirement to use HTTPS, is what I'm trying to say, but to use inside a CodePen, you do need to have HTTPS. Okay, so ours is, mine I put it under Raver. And here is my find population server, and it's synchronous. If I hit the execute task button, it will take me, I can actually make these bigger. It will, I don't need to make that one bigger. So this looks a little bit convoluted. The reason it was a little convoluted is because it's passing the projection coordinate system is passing it is a custom projection. That's just a byproduct of the data set that I downloaded. MSTM used to be a custom projection. Now it's included in ArcGIS. So if I hadn't chosen, if I'd updated that with the projection coordinate system that's in the database itself, I wouldn't have had all that information. But here's the point type. Right now, it doesn't have any features actually associated with it. I would need to feed it a feature if I wanted to run it. Yeah. So let's say I do want to run this somewhere else. Okay? I would need, if I want to actually run this next week, we'll do it. In my web app, I would need to feed it all this information, but the things that would need to change is the feature itself. The feature. So we're going to have to talk about that. We'll do that right now. And I want to change the distance in order to get a result. If I just hit OK right now, I don't think it's going to work because there's no feature there. I would have thought that there would be a one by default, the one that I clicked earlier. Let's hit execute task and see what happens. Yeah, there's no value. The features is what do you call it? Empty. So I need to put something in here if I want to get it to work. So let's look at the API reference. Here is the input spatial reference? Input features. Basically, I need to learn about, I need to put features. Look here, this is what I was talking about before. We could put in a well-known value for the value rather than that. All that was specifying the entire coordinate system. This that's right here. So if I change this entire value here, instead of all this, let's put in 4, 3, 2, 6. I think that's the equivalent right there. WKID, yep. WKID. Well-known ID. All right. So what I'm doing here is saying the spatial reference is this well-known ID 4326. That's actually latitude, longitude. Sometimes it's easier to specify a coordinate in latitude, longitude. That means our feature is going to be in latitude and in longitude. All right, and so we'll need to feed it a, it'll be something like this, a feature that looks like this, but this is paths. So let's find out what a point is supposed to look like. We won't, when we do this next week in the lab, I mean, not the lab, when we do this next week as a web service, we don't actually have to build this ourselves. I just want to be able to test it. And so I want to be able to find out what a feature should look like. I just want to find geometry. Might be easier to do this. I'm just going to Google ESRI geometry JSON format. That's what we want. Point. Oh, but this is these are just raw geometry features. We actually want a feature. Because the API actually hides us having to enter all this. I don't see a quick answer here. This is what it would look like, but this is a path. This is a polyline. One more thing, and then I'll just show another way to do this. Okay. All right, so I was hoping to be able to test right through the REST interface there, providing a point, but I'm not sure what the syntax is for the feature. But there is another way that we can test this without using a web address yet, which is what we'll do next week. I'm sorry, not a web address, a web map yet, and that is to test it right in ArcMap. So ArcMap will allow us to import a geoprocessing tool into ArcMap and then run it right in ArcMap. The kind of wow factor that we're going to lose is that you're not going to be able to actually see much of anything different than if we actually executed the tool right in ArcMap. But none of the data is actually located on the server. So I'm going to open up a fresh version of ArcMap just to make this point, so that it will be a little bit different. The fresh version of ArcMap, I'm not going to load any of the data in. Okay. And, well, I will have to load a data in just so I know where to click. Other than that, there won't be anything loaded in. Taking a few minutes to open. Sorry, it took longer than it did to publish. Okay. So, I am just going to add in the census tract layer, but it's just so that I know where to click. I don't actually have to load this value up. In fact, maybe what I should do is see if I have any other data. Since this is a demonstration, you probably won't have this data, but here is all of the United States. So now I'll know where to click. But I don't have that data loaded. I could actually delete it off my computer at this point because the processing is really going to take place up on the cloud. What I need to do here is add a toolbox, and I go to the GIS servers and I find the toolbox here, and it's under Raber, and it's called Find Population. And I add it. Now it exists over here, right there, and I have that tool, and I can run it. So if I double click on that guy, it's going to look pretty similar to the way it looked before. Why isn't it? Oh, there it goes. I thought it was empty. It's not. It's just taking a second. So now I can click a point. If I click a point over here, I'm going to get very similar results to where I ran it on the web, where I don't get an answer. But if I click here, let's say in Mississippi somewhere, and select a different value, I'm going to go all the way up to 100,000 meters. So that's 100 kilometers. From that click, 100 kilometers. So I'm going to hit OK. And now it's actually running in my office on the machine that's in there. It's not running on my local machine. It's running on that machine. Maybe that's why it's taking a little longer here. Let's look for geoprocessing results. Still running. Taking a little longer than I expected, but it finished. I made it pretty big. So I open that up, and there's the population that lives within 100,000 meters, so 100 kilometers of the click is almost 1 million people live within 100,000 meters. Probably most of them are in the Jackson metro area, but still. So I could run this again. Let's see if I make it smaller. It'll work. So now I'll click down here on the coast somewhere, and I'll leave 40,000 meters as the result, and it'll run again. And each time it actually produces a different result. So it's a little bit different. Another thing that's different than running it on your local machine is that it overwrites the result unless you change the name. Well, it never will do that now. It's totally stateless. It doesn't have any idea that you ran this, that you deleted it, that you kept it there. It doesn't know that exists on your computer now. The server doesn't know that. So this is a new instance of you running that. And I can see the population again right here. That's only 191,000 people that live within 40,000 meters of that particular user click. All right, so are there any other examples of tools that you can think of that you might want to run? Maybe think of an example of a geoprocessing tool in your brain. Think of a thing that you'd want to do that would answer a question. Now, as you do that, think, does ArcGIS already have that capability? In other words, if you're thinking of a tool that selects or that identifies. We already have those abilities. Remember, talked a little bit about them last week. You can go back to the here, the map service. Okay. We have the ability to go in and find an individual cemetery by doing query. We can find a where command. We can do that with congressional districts. So what you really want to be able to do is, when a geoprocessing tool makes the most sense is when you're doing stuff that takes, that's a little bit more complex, and that it takes a couple of steps that a query wouldn't just answer right off. So you might, and it works with raster or vector data. Either one, it'll work with either one. So, and you can mix them. So you could have, you could find out what the average elevation was within a buffered area. That's something that you couldn't do with just an image service, let's say. Actually, you probably could do it with just an image service, but it would involve coding on the front end too. Okay, so it would be something that would involve some coding either way, but you could do it all in Model Builder if you did it on the back end. You could do something that, you could find out the average, the average raster value of any polygon. So the input could be a polygon. The input doesn't have to be polygons. It doesn't have to be points. It doesn't have to be lines. You can do it for anything. Really, with the Hello World example, we showed that it doesn't really have to be spatial. There are other tools for creating things that you don't want to be spatial, but you could do it for anything. All right, so here's my version in ArcMap, the resulting polygons. Okay, one other thing that I was going to show you that you could do is we could modify this so that we wouldn't have to choose necessarily the population value. Remember, that was this calculate field. So the calculate field, this held the population, right? That value held the population. If we wanted to, we could make a new variable and call this a field. Okay, so it's a field variable. Make that a model parameter. I always like to make my outputs the final model parameter. So I'm going to unmake this a model parameter and then remake it a model parameter. The reason why is now it'll show up as the last model parameter. You could also change the order in the properties dialog. That'll work too. All right, so I got my field here, and I'm going to right-click on it and say properties, and then I'm trying to find out where to put the I was going to try to make a field list, a list of valid values. Display property, whoops, that's not what I want to do. Let's see if I just make, no, I can't make Let's see if I insert a create variable and I just make it a string. I'm going to do that for now. I'll make this a string, and the user, in this scenario, the user will have to know what field they want, but I'll give it a default value so it won't be too hard. So I could make this a model parameter. Actually, I'm going to rename this. I'm going to call it field name, and then do that thing I told you about before. And under the calculate field, I'll have to take this value right here and make that the default value. So I'll put that, make that the default value, and I will substitute out. I need to fix that problem. I've been having that for a long time. I'll substitute out percent field underscore name percent. So now what it's going to do is it's going to put in whatever value is in field name into that value. So I can go ahead and save this, and I'll rerun it because I have to in order to make it work. I'll put this input point, I'll put this down on the coast here, say OK. So it finished, it worked. So now if I go to results, I should be able to publish that myself. What I'm going to do is just set this to overwrite the existing service. Did I select that? I need to overwrite an existing service. I don't think I did that last week. I want to overwrite mine, not anybody else's. And if I do select overwrite, notice that I don't have to retype out anything, except for I will have to retype out field name because I didn't add that yet. The field from the population, or from the census record. Here's the default value. So then I can analyze it and publish it. Now, one advantage of registering your data with the server is that you wouldn't have to, it wouldn't cause it to re-upload. Right now it's uploading it and it's copying over it because there's really no way for it to make sure until you upload it that it's the same data set or not. So that is a little bit one advantage of having the data stored on the server and you manually copying it. Because if you want to copy over an existing service and you know the data hasn't changed, then you don't need to do anything. However, the drawback is if the data has changed, you're responsible for manually making sure that it's different. Okay, so you would have to copy it up because it's not going to check. All right, so let's go back to my other one here, and I'm going to remove these two. I don't know if this will update automatically. There's no refresh, so hopefully it does. Nope, it didn't. I'm going to remove it and add it back. Add toolbox. So yeah, now I have that population field name. So I can select a point here, anywhere I want. I'll do 1,000 meters. I'll run it. And then I'm going to do it again. But this time, I'm going to choose a different field. Okay, so I'm going to go back into the data and see. So this first field shows the population. What is P0032? Well, I can go look at the Excel spreadsheet and it'll tell me. Here's the metadata. Okay, so it looks like that's white. Mississippi probably has a fairly low Asian population, at least compared to other states. I mean, along the coast, it's higher. There was some Vietnamese immigrants from after the Vietnam War, and we used to actually have some students in our department from the coast. But anyway, let's see that. That'll be interesting. P003005. So if I want to get the Asian population, and these are the numbers right here, if I want to get that within a certain click, I could go back to my map and say P003005. I think that was it. I should have paid better attention. 2 zeros, 3 zeros. Oh, I closed it up by accident, sorry. Is this right? No, that's the wrong one. This one. So this is the one that's running on the server. So now I can change this to 30005 and choose a value here. Say OK. And it runs. And it's a small area. Oh, in that area got 0. I wonder if that's an error or if my data isn't. If I'm messing up, or let me see. Select an area down where there's more people. Yes. 30005. And I'll go to 40. Okay, good, yeah. So for some reason I must have selected a really rural area at first, where according to the census at least, there were no Asian populations within 1 kilometer circle. It's probably not that hard to do in rural Mississippi. You know, there's probably a few 1 kilometer circles. Like maybe I selected somewhere like in the middle of Marion County or something that didn't even get Columbia or something. I don't know where I selected, but it got 0. So now I selected on the coast, and within that 4 kilometer area, roughly 8,000 people, Asian people that answered that they were Asian on the census at least. Okay, so however accurate the census is. So that was demonstrating a field updating another parameter in the geoprocessing service. Now, in reality, you would probably want that to either be exposed as a list of fields, okay, or when you actually programmed the front end, you didn't make it so that you made it so that the end user didn't see the cryptic field names. Right? So the end user might choose Asian population or black or white population or overall population. You might choose those from a drop-down list. But then when it actually submits, which we'll talk about next week, you use a different value. You have an if statement. If they chose Asian, then you have it select P003005 as the value that you feed in to the geoprocessing service. It's okay to have cryptic values if you're not planning to allow, or you don't want this to be a service that people just access the raw data individually. But your front end should definitely, you should put some thought into the value that gets specified. All right. Another way to test this may be another way to test this, which we'll probably go into next week, but remember we have map and ArcGIS Online. ArcGIS Online here, and we could specify that we want to create a web app in Web App Builder. That might take a little while to set up. So you can enter this geoprocessing service right in here. So I showed you how to test it in ArcMap. Is this the right one? No, that's not the right one. First, find population. So that's my geoprocessing service URL. So it's valid. I can say OK. And so this will allow you to choose whether you want to be able to interactively draw on the map, use a shapefile on a local file system. In other words, you want to let the user upload, or you can select a layer from the map, which we don't really want to do because the only layer on the map is all those points. That would take forever to run. So let's say interactively draw on the map. So now the user is going to be interactively able to draw on the map the input features. Okay, so for the distance features, we want them to have to input it, which is fine. And for the field name, we're not even going to make that visible. We're just going to leave that for now. They're not going to be able to choose that. So say OK here. And now when I click on this guy, I get this tool where I can draw a point on the map, and I got to make sure I choose a point in Mississippi or it won't work. I can choose this guy. So now that's my point. And let's make this a little bit bigger. We'll make it 51. Execute it. So now it's executing out there in my office on the server. Here is the result. It's kind of cryptic, but here's how I get the answer. Okay, I say I want to view the attribute table, and there's the sum. That's the amount of people that live within a certain circle of that. So it's a good way to test it. I'm testing my geoprocessing service. It's working on the internet. The problem here is that there's no nice way to have it show up here. I can modify my tool though, so that one of the outputs, instead of it being a feature class, was actually this number, and it would show up in the window, in addition to the ability to see the whole attribute table. Okay? All right. So we can use Web App Builder to test our apps. I should have done that instead of doing it in ArcMap. All right. Your assignment for this week will be to create a geoprocessing service. Don't focus on making it very advanced unless you really want to. Okay, but a geoprocessing service that uses some geographic process, and then test it in ArcMap. And now that we know it works in in Web App Builder, test it in there too. The nice thing about designing your own tools like this is that this doesn't consume credits at all. So it's using our local hardware to run the process. It doesn't consume credits. And so you don't have to worry about that. Use our hardware as much as you want. Okay. And next week we'll make a little leaflet example and show how it works in there. All right. Any questions on the assignment, which I haven't put up yet, but I'll do it. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and